This letter was found pressed between the warped boards behind a hearth wall, sealed in soot and time, as though the stones themselves had tried to swallow it. I do not know who will read these words, nor if they were ever meant to be read, but I write because silence has become a greater terror than truth. I write from within the cold belly of the king's own house, where the corridors breathe with secrets and the walls remember more than they should. It is winter now, though winter in this place feels different, less a season, more a condition of the soul. The air inside the castle hangs heavy with smoke and damp stone, and the torches burn low as though even the fire hesitates to live here. I serve in the lower halls, beneath the grand chambers where the king walks. We are not meant to look upon him, only to hear the echoes of his passing, the measured steps, the hush that follows, the way voices die when his presence nears. They say Henry VII is a man of calculation, of quiet strength, a ruler who rebuilt a broken crown with patience and iron will. That is what they say above the stairs. Below them we say other things. The kitchens never sleep. Pots boil into the night, and the scent of meat and ash clings to my skin no matter how I wash. I spend my hours among shadows, scrubbing, carrying, listening, always listening, for it is in the unseen places that truth travels freely, whispered between those who believe no one important is near enough to hear. And I have heard things. At first they came as fragments, half words carried on the steam of broth, names spoken too quickly, silences that stretched too long after a question. But over time the fragments formed something whole, something that now sits inside me, like a stone too heavy to carry and too dangerous to set down. There are lists, not the kind kept by stewards or scribes, not inventories of grain or cloth. These lists are quieter, written in rooms that do not welcome light. Names are added, not crossed out. I have seen the parchment only once, by accident, when a door was left ajar, and I lingered longer than I should have. My name was not there, but I recognized others, men who had once laughed in the courtyards, a stable boy who vanished without farewell, a woman from the laundry who simply ceased to exist, as though she had been erased from memory itself. No one speaks of them openly. It is understood that to ask is to invite notice. And notice, in this place, is a dangerous thing. There is a chamber above the west hall that no servant enters unless commanded. Oh, its door is thick, bound with iron, and always guarded, not by soldiers in armor, but by men in plain dress, their stillness more unsettling than any drawn sword. It is said the king meets there in private, away from the eyes of court and council. Some say it is where he keeps his secrets, others say it is where he becomes one. I did not believe such stories at first. I told myself that fear grows easily in places like this, that servants invent ghosts to make sense of their unease. But belief is a fragile thing, and mine began to crack the night I was sent above. It was late, far past the hour when even the fires grow weary. A steward called my name, his voice sharp as though the sound itself might cut. He handed me a tray, wine, bread, a small dish of salted meat, and told me where to go. No explanation, no warning, only the instruction, repeated once, as if to ensure I would not pretend to misunderstand. My hands trembled as I climbed the narrow stairs. Each step felt like a trespass. The air grew colder the higher I went, until it seemed to press against my chest, making each breath an effort. The guard did not speak when I approached. He only opened the door. Inside, the chamber was lit by a single candle, its flame bending as though it wished to flee. And there, seated at a long table strewn with papers, was the king. He did not look as I had imagined. There was no grandeur in him, no visible crown or display of power. He wore dark garments, simple in their cut, and his face was lined not with age alone, but with something deeper, calculation perhaps, or a weariness that never finds rest. His eyes found me at once. I lowered my gaze as I had been taught, but not before I saw it, the sharpness in them, like a blade that had never dulled. "Leave it," he said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. That, more than anything, unsettled me. I stepped forward, placing the tray upon the table. The papers shifted as I did, and though I tried not to look, my eyes betrayed me. I saw names, columns of them, some marked with small symbols I could not understand. He noticed. "Do you read?" he asked. The question struck me like a blow. I hesitated, knowing there was no safe answer. "A little, Your Grace," I said at last. There was a pause. I could feel his gaze upon me, weighing, measuring. "Then you know the value of words," he said, "and the danger of them." I did not respond. I did not dare. "Go," he said, turning his attention back to the parchment, as though I had already ceased to exist. I left quickly, my heart hammering so loudly I feared it might echo through the halls. The door closed behind me with a finality that seemed to seal something inside me as well. From that night on, the castle changed, or perhaps I did. Every whisper carried more weight. Every silence felt deliberate. I began to notice patterns, the way certain men were summoned and never returned, the way the king's movements aligned with the disappearances, the way fear moved through the servants like a quiet plague. And always the lists grew longer. I have thought often of leaving, of slipping away under cover of darkness, of finding some distant village where no one knows my name. But departure is not so simple. The castle holds more than stone and timber. It holds watchful eyes and questions that follow those who vanish without leave. And so I remain, but I cannot remain silent. I think of my mother, who taught me my letters by candlelight, tracing each word as though it were a prayer. She told me that words carry truth, and that truth, once written, cannot be entirely undone. I think of the small cottage where I was born, of the sound of rain upon the roof, of a life that now feels like something I dreamed rather than lived. I did not intend to become a keeper of secrets. I did not choose this. Yet here I am, writing in the dimmest corner I can find, using scraps of parchment stolen from the refuse, my hand unsteady as I try to capture what may soon be lost or silenced. There are moments, late at night, when the castle seems to breathe, not as a living thing, but as something that remembers. The stones creak, the wind slips through unseen cracks, and for a brief instant it feels as though the past presses close, listening. I wonder if others have written as I do now. If somewhere, hidden in walls or buried beneath floors, there are other voices, trapped between lines of ink, waiting for someone to find them. If you are reading this, then perhaps I am not entirely alone. But I fear time is not on my side. Tonight I heard my name, not spoken loudly, not announced as a summons, but whispered as though tested upon the air. I do not know who spoke it, nor from where. Only that it was not a voice I recognized, and that it carried with it a certainty that chilled me more deeply than the winter ever could. I have begun to see the guards more often, not watching me directly, but near enough that their presence cannot be ignored. Conversations cease when I approach. Eyes linger a moment too long before turning away. I think I have been noticed, and in this place to be noticed is to be marked. I will hide this letter when it is done, in a place where fire cannot easily reach, and where careless hands are unlikely to disturb it. I do not know if it will ever be found, or if it will remain here long after I am gone, another secret swallowed by stone. But I must believe that truth has a way of surviving. Even here, even under the watchful eyes of a king, if I am taken, there will be no announcement, no mourning. I will simply cease to exist, as others have before me, and the castle will continue, unchanged, its halls filled with the same quiet obedience, its walls holding the same unspoken truths. Yet these words may endure, and if they do, then let them stand as witness, not to rebellion, nor to defiance, but to the simple, fragile act of seeing and refusing to forget. I hear footsteps now. They are slow, deliberate. They are coming closer. I will leave this here. If I do not write again, let it be known that I did not vanish without thought, nor without fear, but with the hope that somewhere beyond these walls, someone would one day read this and understand why I could not remain silent, even as the silence closed in around me like a grave. This second letter was discovered folded into the lining of a servant's wool cloak, the fabric stiff with age and something darker that time could not fully erase. The stitching had been done in haste, as though the writer feared interruption even in the act of hiding it. I write again, though I no longer know if writing is an act of courage or folly. The castle has grown quieter since my last account, not with peace but with absence. It is a silence that feels earned, as though something has been taken to make room for it. 3 more have vanished. No cries, no struggle, no sign of departure. Only the quiet rearrangement of duties, the reassignment of beds, the careful avoidance of names that once passed easily between us. We do not ask where they have gone. We have learned that questions do not return answers, only attention. And attention, here, is a kind of sentence. The corridors seem longer now. I walk them as I always have, carrying trays, hauling water, tending to tasks that never end, yet each step feels observed. Not always by eyes I can see, but by something present all the same. The torches flicker differently, as though disturbed by unseen movement. Even the air feels watchful. I have tried to convince myself that fear has made me imagine these things, that the mind, when pressed too tightly, begins to create its own ghosts. But there are moments, small, undeniable moments, that refuse to be dismissed. Yesterday I passed the West Hall. The door to the chamber was open, not wide, not inviting, just enough to suggest carelessness or perhaps intent. The guards were absent. The corridor stood empty, the silence stretching unnaturally, as though sound itself had been forbidden entry. I should have walked on. Every instinct I possessed told me to do so. But there is a point at which fear turns into something else. A kind of quiet defiance, or perhaps desperation. I do not know which guided me, only that my feet slowed, then stopped, then turned. I approached the door. The candlelight inside flickered against the stone walls, casting shadows that moved without rhythm. I could hear nothing at first, no voices, no movement, only the faint crackle of flame. And then, as I stepped closer, I saw them. The papers, spread across the table once more, as they had been before. But this time there were more, many more. The parchment overlapped in layers, some newer, some worn at the edges, all bearing the same careful script. Names, so many names. I stepped inside without realizing it, drawn forward by something I could not resist. My hands trembled as I reached for one of the pages. The ink was still fresh, the letters dark and deliberate. I read them. Not all. I could not, but enough. Enough to understand that these were not mere records, not accounts of service or loyalty. These were judgments, quiet decisions made in a place where no one would contest them. And then I saw it. My name. It was not marked as others were. No symbol beside it, no indication of what fate had been decided, only written plain, undeniable among the rest. For a moment I could not breathe. The room seemed to close around me, the walls pressing inward as though they sought to bury me where I stood. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from the sudden weight of knowing. I had not imagined it. I had not been overlooked. I had been waiting. A sound behind me, soft, measured. I turned, and there, standing in the doorway, was the king. Henry VII did not startle, did not speak at once. He simply watched me, his expression unchanged, as though he had expected to find me there all along. I dropped the parchment at once, stepping back as though the act might undo what had already been done. "Your Grace," I managed, though my voice felt distant, unfamiliar. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a quiet finality that seemed louder than any shout. "You read more than a little," he said. It was not a question. "No, Your Grace," I replied quickly. I should not have... "Should not have what?" he interrupted, his tone still calm, still measured. "Seen, understood." I said nothing. There are moments when silence feels like the only defense left. This was one of them. He moved toward the table, his hands resting lightly upon its edge as he regarded the scattered pages. For a time he did not look at me. It was as though I had already been accounted for, already placed within whatever order he had created. "Do you know what it is to hold a kingdom together?" he asked. I did not answer. "I did not inherit peace," he continued. "I inherited fracture. Distrust, men who smiled while sharpening knives behind their backs. A crown that rested upon a foundation of doubt." His gaze shifted then, settling upon me once more. "Order is not given," he said. "It is made, and it is maintained." The words were not spoken with anger. That, more than anything, unsettled me. There was no cruelty in his tone, only certainty. "I serve Your Grace," I said quietly. "I mean no harm." "No," he replied. "You mean to survive." The truth of it struck deeper than any accusation. "Yes," I whispered. He regarded me for a long moment, as though measuring something unseen. Then, without warning, he reached for one of the pages and lifted it slightly, his eyes scanning the lines. "Survival," he said, almost to himself, "is a fragile thing. It depends upon what one knows and what one chooses to do with that knowledge." My heart pounded so violently I feared it might betray me entirely. "I have told no one," I said quickly. "I swear it." "I believe you," he replied. The words should have brought relief. They did not. "Truth does not require telling to become dangerous," he continued. It exists, and in existing it threatens the order I have built. I felt then not hope, not even fear, but a kind of hollow clarity, the understanding that what stood before me was not a man deciding my fate, but a system that had already accounted for me. "What will you do?" I asked before I could stop myself. It was a foolish question. He did not answer it directly. Instead, he stepped closer, his presence quiet, almost gentle, yet impossible to escape. "That," he said softly, "depends on what you do next." The room seemed to tilt. I did not move, I did not speak, and after a moment that felt longer than any I have known, he turned away. "Return to your duties," he said. Just like that. No guards summoned, no command given, no immediate end. Only permission, or perhaps postponement. I left the chamber as though walking through a dream. The corridor beyond felt unreal, the world reduced to the sound of my own unsteady breath and the distant echo of footsteps that may or may not have been my own. Since that moment, nothing has been the same. I am still here. That in itself feels impossible. But something has shifted. I see now how carefully everything is arranged, how each movement, each disappearance, each silence fits into a pattern too precise to be chance. This is not chaos, it is design, and I am part of it. I do not know why I was spared, not yet, but I feel it, like a thread drawn tight around me, pulling me towards something I cannot see. The others look at me differently now, or perhaps I only imagine it. Perhaps they see what I have seen reflected in my eyes. Perhaps they know, or perhaps it is already too late for knowing to matter. I have hidden this letter more carefully than the last. If it is found, then either I have failed in that effort or someone has gone looking. I write faster now, not from panic, but from a strange growing certainty that time is no longer mine to spend as I wish. There is something expected of me. I feel it in the way I am watched, in the way certain doors are left slightly open, in the way silence gathers when I pass. I do not yet understand it, but I will, or I will vanish trying. If I do not write again, then let this stand beside the first as proof that I saw the shape of what lies beneath the crown, not madness, not cruelty alone, but something colder, something deliberate, something that does not fear being unseen because it has already accounted for those who might see it, and now I think it has accounted for me as well. This final letter was found sealed within a hollow beneath a loose stone, wrapped in cloth as though it had been prepared not for hiding, but for burial. The edges are scorched, as if it had once come too close to flame and yet endured, like the hand that wrote it, for just a little longer than it should have. I write now with a steadier hand than before, though not from calm. There is a clarity that comes when fear has fully settled, when it no longer rises and falls, but remains constant as breath. I have passed beyond dread into something quieter, something that watches even as it is watched. I understand now, not everything, not the full design, but enough to know that I was never meant to leave, enough to know that the moment I saw my name upon that page, my path ceased to be my own. It began 3 nights after I last wrote. I was summoned, not by name, not openly, but by absence. My duties were taken from me, one by one, until I found myself standing idle in a place where idleness is not permitted. No command was given, yet none was needed. I followed the silence as it guided me upward, through corridors I had no right to walk, toward that same chamber above the West Hall. The door was open again. This time I did not hesitate. Inside, the candle burned lower than before, its flame small, controlled, as though it had been trained not to flicker. The table remained, though the papers had changed. Fewer now, more ordered, more final. And there he stood. Henry VII did not turn when I entered. He knew I was there. I think he had always known I would come. "You understand," he said. Not a question. "Yes," I replied. And I did. Not the details, not the reasons behind each name, but the purpose, the shape of it, the quiet necessity that he believed justified all that had been done. This kingdom, so recently torn by war, does not hold itself together by loyalty alone. It holds by control, by certainty, by the removal of all that might one day fracture it again. I had thought the lists were about punishment. They are not. They are about prevention. "You have seen what others have not," he continued. "You have stood where others have not been permitted to stand." "I did not seek it," I said. "No," he agreed, "but you did not turn away either. There was no accusation in his voice, only recognition. "You left me," I said quietly, "when you could have ended it," he finished. I nodded. "Yes," he said, "I could have." Silence stretched between us, not empty, but full of something unspoken. A decision that had already been made, waiting only to be understood. "Why?" I asked. It was the last question I would ever dare to ask him. He turned then, slowly, his gaze meeting mine with that same unyielding sharpness. "Because you are not the first," he said, "and you will not be the last." I felt the meaning of those words before I fully grasped them. "There must always be those who see," he continued. "Not many, never many, but enough." "To do what?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "To ensure that what is necessary continues," he said. The room seemed colder. "I am no courtier," I said, "no advisor. I am nothing." "Exactly," he replied. The simplicity of it struck deeper than any elaboration could have. "You move where others are not seen. You hear what others are not meant to hear. You are overlooked until you are not." I felt then the shape of what had been placed before me. Not a choice, a role. "You would make me," I began, but the words would not come. He did not finish it for me. He did not need to. "I have already been written," I said, my voice barely more than a breath. "Yes," he said, "and the others also written. And if I refuse?" For the first time, there was the faintest pause, not hesitation, consideration. "Then the list remains as it is," he said, "and your name will be understood in the way it was first intended." There it was. Not a threat, a statement, the kind that leaves no room for misunderstanding. I thought then of the faces I had known, of the names I had read, of the quiet disappearances that had once seemed so distant from me. I thought of my mother, her hands guiding mine across the page, teaching me that words carry weight. I thought of the life I had imagined beyond these walls, and I saw with a clarity that allowed no comfort that such a life no longer existed for me. Not because it had been taken, but because it had never truly been possible. "What would I be required to do?" I asked. The words tasted foreign. "You will listen," he said. "You will observe, and when the time comes, you will remember. And then," he replied, "you will write." A strange, hollow sound escaped me then, something between a laugh and a breath. "Write?" I repeated. "Yes," he gestured to the table. "To be written is to be decided," he said, "but to write is to decide." The meaning settled slowly, heavily. "You would place that in my hands?" "I would place it where it already rests," he said. I looked down at my own hands then, as though seeing them for the first time. Hands that had scrubbed floors, carried water, served food to those who would never know my name. Hands that had written these letters. Hands that had already begun to record what others would have preferred remain unseen. I understood then. Not fully, never fully, but enough. "I will not be remembered kindly," I said. "No," he agreed. "Nor will you," I added, before I could stop myself. A dangerous thing to say, and yet he did not react with anger, only with something quieter. "History," he said, "is rarely kind to those who hold it together." There was nothing more to say. The silence that followed was not empty. It was complete. I do not know how long I remained there after that. Time seems to move differently in such moments, bending around decisions that cannot be undone. When I finally left, the castle felt unchanged, and yet I knew that everything within it had shifted. Or perhaps it is I who has changed. I have begun to notice things I once ignored, patterns in speech, hesitations in movement, the smallest signs of doubt or ambition, loyalty or deception. It is as though a veil has been lifted, revealing a world that existed all along, just beyond my understanding. I do not know if I am becoming what he intended, or if I am simply becoming what this place requires. I still write, not as I did before, in secret and in fear, but with a purpose I do not fully trust. These words, too, may be found one day, or they may be lost, as so many others have been. If they are found, then let them stand as more than confession. Let them be a warning. Power does not always shout. It does not always show itself in cruelty or spectacle. Sometimes it is quiet, measured, patient. Sometimes it writes, and those who write shape what remains when all else is forgotten. I do not know how long I will continue in this role, nor what will become of me when I am no longer useful. I have seen enough to understand that no one is exempt from the design, not even those who serve it. Perhaps one day my name will be written again. Perhaps it already has been. If that day comes, I will not be surprised. I have come too far to believe in escape, only in continuation. I will hide this letter where the others rest, in the hope that they might one day be read together, that the full shape of this story might be seen, not as fragments but as something whole. And if you are the one who reads them, if you have followed these words from beginning to end, then know this: you have now seen what I once saw, and in seeing it, you have already been written.